Hey everyone, welcome back to my kitchen. Tonight I thought I'd show you how to make one of my favorite side dishes, and my family absolutely loves it. No matter how much I make of this rice, it never seems to be enough. So tonight I'm just going to make about 1.5 cups of dry, which will make about 3-4 cups of cooked rice. And the secret to this rice is a couple of things. First, I always use garlic. We're going to get that going in this pot. I like to always cook my rice by starting it in a hot pan. I'm going to put this pan on and get it hot. And sometimes when you make rice, a lot of people just put the rice in there, put the water in there, maybe put a little bit of salt, put the lid on, bring it up to a boil, let it steam and boil for a little while, turn it down to simmer, and wait for it to be nice and fluffy. And it's a very typical way of making rice, but that just gives you bland white rice, and sometimes that's what you want, but a lot of times you want something a little bit more flavorful. If you're making a base, as I am tonight, for a chicken curry mixture, or any kind of savory chicken dish that you're trying to stretch that little bit of chicken you might have into a family meal. Maybe you only have a pound of chicken, so you don't want to make those chicken breasts or chicken pieces into individual servings because it just doesn't go as far. So if you want to make some kind of chicken gravy, this is a great base to use, this rice, because it's flavored with garlic. And tonight I'm going to make it with coconut oil because I kind of like the coconut flavor that goes along with the chicken curry that I'm going to make to put on the top of it. But you can use butter, you can use olive oil, you can use canola oil, or any vegetable kind of oil. You can use any of that depending on what kind of flavor that you want. But I always use garlic, and I always make sure I have some salt available to put in there. And I just use plain water, no broth, and it's just amazing. We call it ninja rice around here because it's so sneakily good. So hopefully you'll enjoy it as well. We're going to start by chopping up some good fresh garlic. Now, these are peeled whole cloves. You can chop it, you can press it. Pressing your garlic is going to release a lot of flavor. So I like to just roughly chop my garlic, and this will leave a few big chunks of garlic in the rice, which we like around here. If you don't like chunks of garlic in things, if you want to hide it a little more, you can use garlic powder, although that's not my favorite to use in this. Sometimes garlic powder can be a little bitter, and it will come out in this dish. You know, a lot of people don't like to peel their garlic because they think it's a pain, and it is kind of a pain, but you can buy garlic already peeled. I buy my garlic in bulk, and I stick it in the freezer, and it comes peeled in a big bag. It's about a 1-pound bag. It comes all peeled, and I just put it in the freezer, and as I need it, I pull it out. And it kind of looks funny when you pull it out. It's a little bit translucent, but once you start cooking it, all that white comes back, and it looks like regular fresh garlic, and it tastes like fresh garlic, and it's just really, really good. So I keep it in there because you know, garlic can dry out after a time. It can start growing, and when it starts growing, you really don't want to use it because that green center that sprouts out of your garlic can be really bitter and add an off taste to your meals. So you want to make sure, if you're going to use fresh garlic that you just purchased from the store, that it's nice and firm, it's not shriveled at all, and that there's no green sprouts growing out of it. So in order to always have fresh garlic around, I just keep it in the freezer. You can buy it in a jar. A lot of times you can find a big jar of already peeled and chopped garlic, but I find keeping it in a jar of water or whatever it is that it's kept in takes away some of the flavor, so I don't like to use that as much. Alright, our pan is nice and hot. I'm going to add some coconut. Coconut oil is kind of a funny thing because We think of oils as being a liquid, but coconut oil at room temperature, it's actually at 76 degrees or below, is a solid. But it's actually quite good for you. It's a really good oil to use. I buy it in the bulk, as you can see, and I buy the organic, unrefined kind of. And I put about a tablespoon in there. I'm just going to put the garlic in there and get it going. You don't want to heat your garlic up too much. You don't want it to get brown and burned because it will be bitter. You just put that in with just enough time to measure out your rice. I always use a long grain rice, whether it be white rice or brown rice. Usually with this kind of a dish, a side dish like this, I only use a white rice because the brown rice will take a little bit too long. I use the long grain basmati kind of rice, and it's very aromatic. It smells very, very good. You can use a jasmine. If you want just plain white long grain rice, that's great. So I'm going to add this in. That's 1 cup. I'll put about 1.5 cups of rice. Put it in there and grab your wooden spoon and give it a stir. Just going to coat your rice with that coconut oil and get that garlic off the bottom of the pot because you don't want it to get overly brown. And you're just going to cook that for just a couple of minutes. Don't want to cook it too much. While you're waiting for that to cook, make sure you have on hand about 2.5 cups of water. It's been common wisdom when you're cooking rice to double the amount of liquid for how much you put in rice. So I put in 1.5 cups of rice. So traditionally I would put in 3 cups of water. But I found that I much prefer to go a little less on the water. Even at this higher altitude when it's more dry, I go about 1 part rice to 1.5 parts water. So I have about 2.5 cups of water to 1.5 cups of rice. That's about right. If I put in 3 cups, I find it's a little bit too juicy, too watery, and by the time I get that water evaporated off, my rice is more soft than I want it to be. So I put in a little less water, but that's totally up to you what you do with that. You can add more, you can even add less if you really like a little bit more firmness to your rice. Alright, it's been cooking here for a little bit. I'm just going to put the water in, and it is hot water. The reason I do the hot water is I don't want to cool off the rice too much when I put the water in, okay? You want it to remain pretty hot. Just give it a stir. You're going to add some salt here. I add a good teaspoon of salt. If you don't add salt, if you forget to add the salt, your finished rice will just not taste like you want it to. It will have a blandness. It's just like cooking those potatoes. You need to cook them in salted water in order to get a good flavor on it. We're just going to put the lid on. Make sure you get the lid on that. You're going to bring it back up to a boil, and as soon as you hear the lid popping around, turn it down to a simmer, and you're going to cook it for about 15 minutes. At about 10 minutes, you're going to lift the lid and check it to make sure that the pot isn't drying out. No one likes burnt rice, and that's one of the things about rice. If you do burn your rice, the pot's basically ruined. You can't scrape off the top layer because that smokiness has flavored that whole pot of rice, and you'll have to start over. So it's always better to be a little bit more careful in the beginning and watch your pot. But you don't want to check it too much because every time you lift the lid off, you're letting out that hot steam, and it's going to make a difference in how your rice cooks up. So let it go for about 10 minutes after it is brought to the boil, and you take it back down to a simmer. Check it after about 10 minutes to make sure that the liquid hasn't boiled all the way off. If the liquid has boiled off, add some more hot water, maybe about 1/2 cup, and let it cook for another 5 minutes and check it again. And you should have a great side dish at the end of about 15 minutes. So we'll go from there and check it. I'll see you back in about 15 minutes. Hey, it's been about 15 minutes, so let's check on that rice over there. That was a yucky sound. All right, where's my wooden spoon? All right, trusty wooden spoon. All right. Smells divine. Okay, if you can see that, it's got some of that garlic floating on the top, just right there, and it's all come back to life. Just fluff it up. Oh, it's wonderfully fluffy. Beautiful. All right, that's perfect. That's just the way that you want it to be. If there's still a little bit of liquid down at the bottom, put the lid back on. You don't necessarily have to put it back on the heat. If you have a nice heavy bottomed pot like this one is, just put the lid back on and let it steam a little bit longer, and it will probably be nice and fluffy and ready to serve within 5 minutes or so. So we're just going to set that aside and get started on the chicken curry that's going to go over the top of it. It smells so good. See you in a minute.